Welcome to Shorty Super Coach, and I wanted to talk a little bit about the midfield today. So we're going to take a look at that in a minute. Probably more the upper echelon and some of the real premiums because you don't want to get those guys wrong. But it's not going great, is it? We're in lockdown. If you're in Victoria, it's tough, and I hope you're going all right out there. It won't be for too long. But I tell you what, a lot of my videos I mentioned leading into it that I was going to the Grampians, and Shorty was looking forward to a little holiday, but it didn't pan out that way. But it was an absolute howler. What was it, Friday? I take off, thinking, beauty, few days off, fantastic. Go for a few adventures, go exploring. This will be great. And I didn't even check my messages. I signed off to the world. It's like a 3-hour drive. Did a few Supercoach videos, which you would have seen on the drive. Good as gold. Had my podcast on. Just disconnecting at its finest. Then I actually, when I pulled over for one of those Supercoach videos, I just checked a few messages. A couple of the guys were like, oh, what about your time away? Like, what are you going to do? And I'm like, what of it, And then I did a bit of research and, well, it only took one Google search and boom, we're going into lockdown as of that night. And I'm like 40 minutes away from the Grampians. It's fair to say I was not happy. Not happy at all.
Seriously, guys. Who did this? I need to know who put my calculator in Jell-O, or I'm gonna lose my freaking mind!
Maybe a touch more pissed off than that.
No, God! No, God, please, no! 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 No!
Yeah, about that, and probably a little bit of this too.
Well, if you're going to do it, you may as well do it properly.
It's fair to say my steering wheel copped a bit of a beating. Wasn't happy at all. Still not stoked about it. But that's how it is. It's just been a shitful time at certain periods over the last 12 months, and we continue to do our best. But for the next however long I take to run through this, we're going to switch off from that. We're going to look at a bit of Supercoach. So the midfield, I've never really seen a more difficult midfield than this year. I don't know why, but a lot of the guys right up the top, for whatever reason, whether it's they haven't done it year upon year, or they're just, I feel like they're too expensive, like they're overs rather than on point or a touch value. Don't know. I'll run through it in a second. But look, you can't get it wrong in the midfield. It's so important to nail it. The most points are available. It's the highest scoring position. And history suggests it. Look at last year's averages. Of course, Gawn was number one. Then you got Neil, Steele, Oliver. Lloyd is, of course, a superstar. Then you got McRae, Grundy, another superstar. I'm not going to count Howe. It was only 4 games. But then you got Petrarca, Bont, Merritt, Hunter, Kelly, Dangerfield, Mitchell, Fife, Lyons. Then Goldstein again, rounds out the top 18 or so. So it's like, Ruckman, we have some amazing Ruckman at the moment, but historically, and nothing's changed, the midfield is where the points are at. So when you pay that big money, you don't want to get it wrong. So I've got it wrong before, and it hurts more than most. I think if you waste like 490k or 520k, in the back line, forward line, yeah, it's annoying, but if you spend over 600k or somewhere around that mark in the midfield, expecting 110 average, and you don't get it, and you got to trade them off, well, nothing quite stings as much. So I want to go through the midfield, and look, I'll see how far we go in terms of where I cap it, but probably won't be going any lower than sort of 450k. I did that mid-price madness video, so we'll probably stick to more of the upper echelon, because we talk about rookies, we talk about breakout guys all day long. It's exciting, but nothing's more important than picking the premiums. You'll probably pick 11, 12 or so in your starting side. And if you can get 12 that you don't have to touch for the rest of the year, that's an amazing start. And you can focus in on other areas and upgrading your side rather than patching up some fallen pieces that you thought were going to be stalwarts of your side. But let's start from the very top. And Lachie Neale, he speaks for himself. He's a superstar. You can pay the money and you'll get fantastic results. So that's fair. But I do want to, Jack Steele just probably isn't lighting my absolute fire. He falls into the category of, he's only done it once. And I know he's a star, but, Crouch comes to the club. Will that help him? Will he share some points? How will it affect it? Personally, I'm always a bit worried about spending 660k on a guy that's only done it for 1 year. Petrarca falls into that category as well. Zach Merritt falls into that category too. And there's a few of the top 7 that haven't really... Merritt has scored pretty well previously, but I don't know, that is top end. I don't think anyone's going to... What's he in? 7% aside? I just don't see... I see this one as like his career best. Oliver, I'm a massive fan. All right, full disclosure, what's my midfield right now? Neale, Oliver, Josh Kelly, Paddy Cripps, and it is Jai Simpkin in an M5 still. Shoot me down while you can, but he's in there. So let me discuss a few of these other guys right at the top end. Jack Macrae, I'm just concerned about Bulldogs midfielders in general. There's so many in there. Who's going to dominate? Who's going to do it each week? I don't know. Will Macrae get pushed out to a wing a little bit? I don't know, maybe. Beveridge has done some strange things. Will Dunkley be in there? What's Bontempelli going to do? Surely pure mid, but, there's so much going on in that Dogs midfield, which is great for their side. But with Treloar coming, there's even more. Bailey Smith will be looking for extra time in there. So I'm steering clear of Doggies midfielders. Yes, Treloar, Macrae and Bont, they'll all average really well, but I don't want to pay 650k for a guy who averages 110. Yes, 110 is good and you would take that. But he's right at that upper echelon of price. And if you're paying 650k, you pretty much want last year's average or thereabouts, I feel like 110 is like a really good marker for picking premiums in the midfield. But when we're going over 600k, I feel as if we're thinking like, 115, I want a superstar, career best year sort of stuff. Macrae, when he's in there, in the guts all the time, absolute superstar. But he did get pushed out to the wing early on last year. I just don't know what's going to go on. Petrarca, he's in 11% of sides. I personally don't want to touch him. He was fantastic last year, but like Steele, he's done it once. It's not to say they can't do it again, because they probably will, and they're very good players. But when I'm spending that much coin, I want to know they've done it year upon year, at least a couple of years, at least have a couple of years behind it to know that that's not just the outrider. And by saying that, I'm not writing them off, but they're just guys that I go, I'm comfortable having them as guys I want to get to at some stage rather than start with. I want to start with just know what you're going to get factor. And these guys, they might continue to average 120. And I'll go, tip my hat, well done, fair enough. I'll try and get you throughout the year. But I think they're more likely than, say, Oliver, Neale, a couple other guys. I think your likes of Petrarca and Steele are more likely to drop or have some inconsistencies. Maybe teams do a bit more homework on them now that they've really exploded. So just a few thoughts. Lachie Hunter, we just wouldn't consider him. He's a ball magnet, but we couldn't go near him. Josh Kelly, like I said, he's in my side. I really think he's got some extreme upside. He's a Rolls Royce for the reason, and I seriously feel as if he can definitely continue this average of like 115, which he's done on the quiet for some time. I feel like we don't talk about him a lot, in the footy circles. As people say gun midfielders, they go Danger, they go Neale, they go Cripps, they go Fife. Kelly, is it because he's in Sydney, or is it the Victorian bias? I don't know, but I really feel like he's a guy who's capable of averaging 120. So at that average, I feel as if I'm going to get at least 112, 113, and there's a potential for a bit more in my eyes. Dangerfield, well, we'll consider him a forward. Tommy Mitchell, he's in 13% of sides, but again, I really like him, but his body is a little concerning at the moment. I know he's racing the clock for round one. That's for a guy with his history, that's not really what I want to dabble in. Nat 5, boom, kicks 5 in the intra club, fantastic. No, not fantastic in my eyes. That means shit. He's probably going to be considering himself as a genuine forward now. And yes, he's going to play midfield, of course. He's a star, but I want him to be pure mid. You know, that's if I'm selecting for Supercoach. You know, maybe for Fremantle, having him forward is pretty damn valuable. But he might kick 3 some days, and then there'll be days where he doesn't touch the footy for 20 minutes because he's forward. And I think when we're picking our midfielders, we just want them around the contest all day long. You know, maybe the occasional rest up forward, but not a guy who's the coach is seriously thinking about bringing the new wave through and using 5 forward, you know, maybe 50-50. It's not for me. Jared Lyons, just a consistent guy, but you couldn't start him. Matt Crouch, I also just feel like this 111 average is like about his top because he needs so much of the footy to damage you. And I just don't feel like we've seen a lot of solid averages from him. And I feel like this one, for whatever reason, was a fantastic year. But I personally just don't see him. I think it's risky to start with him. I see him more as like a guy averages around 105. You know, he's got some Ollie Wines vibes, you know, really consistent, but not necessarily having the weapons and the impact to go too far beyond that status. Pendlebury's been doing it for years, did it again, to much of a surprise, really, but we just couldn't start with him again. He's a guy who's a bit older. Same could be said for Boak, you know, could we start with him? He's a little bit older. You know, these are guys that are the best players in the competition, but there's just little knocks on them that, you know, maybe the end could be any stage from here, you know. It's tough. Like last year, you'd be saying the same thing about Pendlebury. Oh, he can't do it again, can he? And he does, but at some stage he won't. So I don't want to pick a guy and then after round 6 go, oh, this was the year that he just trails off a touch and averages like 102, which is still great, but it's not absolute midfield premium. Boak has had a stellar couple of years, but, you know, he's getting closer to the end. You know, he's past his best, is he? His last 2 years have been his best. I just don't want to start with him. Taylor Adams, really love him as a selection. Then he goes and gets himself injured. And an injury that's been haunting him for some time, you know, these types of issues. So, you know, side bottom, he's forward. Adam Treloar, same said, you know, like, I don't want to start any dogs mids. Menegola, just a fantastic year, but not a guy you build your midfield around. And then we really taper off. You know, Rockcliffe, Parker, Gaff, Libber, Miller, Greenwood. Laird is a guy that, you know, clearly is a star, but you can stay him in the back line. Anderson, Wines, Dunkley, forward line option. Duncan, Guthrie, a couple of outstanding cats, but you wouldn't start with them. Shield, McCluggage. You know, we really dip away. And some of these guys that are around and above 600k, you know, like I said throughout this video, I'm finding it difficult to really have a handful of guys that I trust fully. You know, Cripps you can lock in, Neil you can lock in. I think you can lock in Oliver. I think he's a superstar. And then you can fill it out for the rest. Now, I'm going to sort of skip away, you know, a few of these guys that aren't that relevant. But you got Walsh in 9% of sides. I thought Canelio might be in more. I'm not saying get him, but I thought he might be in more than 2%. Who else have we got floating around? Obviously, we'll touch on Rao. So there's Rao. And there's a couple other blokes that are worth a mention. For sort of, because I think a lot of people are finding that, you know, 3, maybe 4 guys that they can really trust in the midfield. But then they're sort of saying, oh, no, I'm going to keep scrolling. And then they're finding ourselves in those sort of next generation types of models. So I think when you talk next generation, there's probably no better example than Raul, Taranto, and who was the other bloke I said? Walsh. I'm just going to put the lappy over on the desk, but what are my thoughts on those guys? Probably no, and no, if I'm honest. I'm a huge no on Raul. I know that's probably going to piss some people off, but I just don't see it. The guy is so young. He's coming off a big injury. Clubs are going to go to work on him. You know, not only is he a youngster, but he's their best mid, you could argue, you know, or most damaging. Clubs might tag him. How can you expect a guy like this to know what he's going to do with the tag? You know, you can't pay that sort of money. I just don't think, I mean, I seriously can't see the thought in it. I mean, at that price, he needs to be a keeper because they're not picking him to make money. He needs to be in our side all year, and it would be a phenomenal effort for him to do that. And I just think it's too risky. Taranto, you know, look, I don't mind that. He's maybe not the best ball user going around, but I don't know. It's just, I could mount a case for Taranto. I really like him as a player. I don't know. Can he go beyond that 105 mark? I'm not sure. Will his ball use hold him back at the start of his career? I don't know. Is he going to be like just a perennial sort of 95 to 106 type of guy? I'm not sure. At that price, he's value, but is he enough value to make him just a set and forget? Probably not. But if you like him, yeah, he offers some value. If you need convincing, you know, I'd probably be at 400k. Yeah, I'm in. 450, nah, maybe not. And Walsh, he's probably out of those, he's my most fancied of those three. I mean, I just think his back end of last year was amazing. He's a star of the comp. He has been basically since he walked on to debut. But super talent, isn't going to cop much of a tag, you wouldn't have thought, because so much attention goes to Cripps and Maywell to Williams. The only knock is that maybe he's a little bit of a winger, you know, maybe a bit more on that wing, which does give you limitations, you know. Same could be said for McCluggage, who I love as a footballer, but to get those real, genuine 110 plus sort of averages, you got to have high tackle numbers. You got to have high contested ball. And to be on a wing, you may not always get that. I'm sure Walsh has an inside game and is developing it, but that would be my only criticism. And look, yeah, I'm a massive fan of Jai Simpkin. I probably hammered that point home enough on other videos, but I, for whatever reason, prefer him against all those three guys. I could be left wiping the egg off my face 4 rounds in, as Raoul's averaging 109 and Taranto's averaging 107 and Walsh, he's gone 111, you know, and here's Simpkin going at 86. That's a hypothetical I don't really want to think about, particularly in my vulnerable state as we're in lockdown, but that's how I see the midfield. I am finding it difficult. I remember other years where I go, gee, here's like 8 guys that are jets. I could do with all of them. I'll just pick 4 or 5. But I really am stretching to find a handful of guys that I can trust, you know, in there all the time, done it before, prime of their careers, body's good, you know, all that sort of stuff. Let me know if you reckon there's a couple of guys who are premiums that I maybe didn't mention or didn't give enough credit to. So I'd love to hear that. And I'll be back too with a couple more videos. I'll have a bit of an update on my side also, so that should be interesting. But yeah, otherwise, that's pretty much all I wanted to talk about. Hopefully, you know, you're staying sane if you're in Victoria, and hopefully it is all done by sort of Wednesday, Thursday. But we'll cross our fingers and see how we go. But I'll talk to you guys soon. Cheers.